Pleased to welcome Eric Edholm, a good friend of mine, to the program. Eric, it's been quite some time since the 2022 NFL draft, but for you, how long does it take to decompress after something so huge?
Yeah, it definitely has. There are years that have a little longer lasting effect on me. I'm a little more worn out than other. This year went pretty well. I think part of it was my own organization. 2020 was obviously its own deal, but 2021, colleague of mine passed away unexpectedly at age 39, 37, Therese Paler. We had a few things editorially that were kind of jumbled up a little bit. And I don't know, there were just a couple of things along the way in the 2021 draft cycle that really wore me down. And this year went a lot smoother. So I'll say I'm fully charged up and ready to go. And even though the NFL is as busy as ever, it's at least a little bit of downtime before training camp.
Favorite part about this time of year for you?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, for a couple of things that come to mind, I get to kind of reconnect with some people that, maybe we traded texts during the busy draft cycle or saw them quickly in person or whatever. I can kind of catch up with the folks that help me do my job, people in the know around the league, and, ask about their kids and do some of that stuff. So it's good to kind of have that little more flexibility in that regard. Plus there's always, during the season, like you'll be in October and you think, I'd on a rainy day, I'd like to do a feature on this guy, or I'd like to chase this story, but it's really not the kind of story that, you have the time to do during the regular season or whatnot. So May, June, early part of July, those 10, 11, 12 weeks in there are really a good time to make some calls, bank some stories, put some stuff in the hopper, so to speak, and stretch your legs a little bit on the projects that you probably wouldn't normally have the time to do during a busy season.
And even catch up with your family and reunite with the loved ones that you have, I imagine, is also on the top of that list.
It's number 4 or 5 on the list, but my kids aren't watching this, so that's good.
Nobody's watching. Nobody's watching.
No, yeah. No, it definitely helps. We did a little 2-week family vacation. You and I were chatting about. It was great. It's probably the most one-on-one time I've had with everybody in one spot in a long time.
We talked about the decompression from the 2022 NFL draft. So to you at this moment, what's the biggest difference between the 22 and 23 NFL drafts?
Yeah, it's going to end up being something related to the quarterbacks. I mean, obviously this year was a little bit of a different year, as anyone who follows the NFL and the NFL draft know that, Kenny Pickett goes in round 1. We didn't have another quarterback drafted until round 3. And, that kind of pattern has been pretty different from years past. And I think it'll be different from next year. I think there's enough heft, even if a lot of these quarterback prospects are more potential than proven at this point. I think that's going to be one of the biggest things. I mean, depending on what teams think of Bryce Young, who might be, shorter than my wife. I mean, he's like 5'9". I don't care what he's listed at, right? Or what teams think about CJ Stroud, at Oklahoma or at Ohio State. Excuse me. And then there's this slew of either untested quarterback prospects with a high upside, like Anthony Richardson from Florida, or kind of the 1-year guys like Tyler Van Dyke from Miami, or the multiple year guys who still have questions, but you could see them rising up like a Will Levis from Kentucky or somebody. So I just think we're going to end up having more options, more attractive options in that position. And as you know, they tend to go pretty high, the more highly regarded they are. So that will definitely shape this next draft cycle a little differently, I think.
Is there anybody in those quarterbacks you just mentioned outside of Stroud and Young that slots in as your number 3 quarterback then?
Yeah, haven't quite gotten to put a full list together or whatever.
Yeah.
I can say that Van Dyke is interesting to me. I mean, the more I watched him, the more I really appreciated him and kind of, we've seen quarterbacks obviously come in for a season or a part of a season. I think he had 9 or 10 starts last year, I want to say.
Yeah.
And, they look really good. And then the second year, the expectations are really high, whether it's a Spencer Rattler or anybody else. And they flop. They either lose their job or don't have the statistical season. Jordan Love would be another one. He was, tremendous as a junior with the touchdown interception ratio, completion percentage. The next year, coaching change, personnel changes, things fall apart, and he had a vastly different year than I think a lot of people expected. I could easily see that happening a la Rattler last year with 2 or 3 of these guys. So, I'm not going full in on any of them to that degree yet, but there's some fascinating ones out there. There's no doubt.
Does what happened to Spencer Rattler last year cause teams to be a lot more cautious, or scouts to be a lot more cautious with this crop of quarterbacks again?
Yeah. And I think when I start making my calls on the 2023 guys, which hasn't really happened in earnest, I've asked about a couple players in particular and things like that, but you find that media hype and excitement and fan interest in these is always a little bit more overblown than what the NFL people think. I think most of the scouts are pretty skeptical by nature, right? That's their job, is to, to have a questioning eye and not, kind of tune out the noise, if you will, and just be able to look at a prospect and pretend like they've got just a generic black and white jersey. And you don't really even see who the face is, and just tell me what the player is. Doesn't matter what the name on the back is or how much excitement there is. Let me try to think of a good example of one. It's just there's all the time it happens where, Sam Howell was another guy who was really touted a year ago.
Yeah.
But everybody kind of foresaw, hey, look, he may not put up the monster numbers he did,
because he lost all those weapons, right, from the offense the previous year. Like, how could you replace the guys that he had the year before?
And they didn't get better on the offensive line. And that was, those two things right there, you could understand that why he'd take a step back. But talking to people a year ago, and if you ever brought up the idea of him possibly being a first round pick, there was a lot of, not that they hated him as a prospect, but he just, you didn't always sort of, we tend to elevate these guys a little bit too quickly. And if you look back, every year there's 2 or 3 of these quarterbacks that people have going relatively early at this stage of the game. And, 9 months from now, we're looking back and having a good laugh at it.
Nothing to laugh about here, but on that topic of guys that are elevated in the conversation, one of your articles recently was about the first overall selection of Jamarcus Russells. And that's quite the story, right? And one of the biggest benefits of the Players Tribune is these players get to tell their story from their perspective.
Yeah.
What was your biggest takeaway from Jamarcus Russells', I guess, struggles? Going as far back as high school.
Yeah, you love to sort of, not love, because in this case it's obviously he had to go through a lot of stuff. Some of it was his own issues. Some of it was things that he was kind of swept into the undertow, but getting exposed to codeine in cough drop or cough syrup fashion at age 14. And basically, without coming out and saying it, he made it sound like he used it quite often from that point on. And it's easy to figure out how kids can get off track and have issues that either aren't diagnosed properly, or they're ignored by the players, or not enough people in their support circles around them are telling them what they don't want to hear, which is, hey, this is an issue. We got to you want to be the number 1 pick in the draft, you want to have a long thriving NFL career, we've got to talk about this. Brett Favre had to go through his pain pill thing, and other quarterbacks along the way, and other players at other positions have had their demons. Some guys make it through, others don't. I definitely think he glossed over some parts as far as work ethic. There was some legendary stories about not studying the playbook and not putting in the extra time. He mentions it. He just didn't go into a lot of detail. It was a lot about the stuff we didn't know and that he felt we should. And I like that. I appreciated his candor for sure.
Secondly, to do with the kind of the first overall pick, the Detroit Lions done a wonderful job. The behind the scenes looks at the NFL draft. And there's a lot of those videos going around the National Football League, and they're always well done. There's some NB amongst us that cover the National Hockey League on a daily basis in that department. The Lions do a wonderful job, as I mentioned, but their reaction to Trayvon Walker going first overall to Jacksonville is fantastic because Aiden Hutchinson drops into their lap, a local kid. What do you enjoy the most about these behind the scenes videos that we see at this time of the year?
Yeah, you really see, and you know, some of these guys I do have relationships with, and you know, you hear how they talk over the phone or in person and casually at a different event, and then you kind of see how much they feel is riding on the line. I mean, GMs, I think, don't have the job security that they did 10 years ago, 5 years ago, even. That's a position that's become almost as volatile as head coaches, which cycle, you know, every couple of years in some spots. So you can definitely see the pressure on these GMs as they're, you know, wringing their hands and pacing around the room and trying to figure out how the scenario is going to play out. The first pick thing was interesting because it was one of two results. They were either going to have Hutchinson on the board or they weren't.
Yeah.
So, you know, as Brad Holmes said, I've played through this 1,000 times. He was almost talking himself out of being nervous, I think, in the sense like, I got this, right? The trickier move was getting up to get Jameson Williams, but
which was fantastic video, by the way, the way they did that.
He loves seeing, you know, it's like a wave of tidal wave of emotions all in a short period of time. New Orleans is on the clock. You know, the team that trades ahead of them all of a sudden is one that has wide receiver in mind. They were correct about that part.
Yeah.
They had to be thinking, oh no, we just lost our guy.
Yeah.
And if that were to have happened, what direction would they have just stayed at 32 and 34 and done something else? Was there another receiver they wanted, some other position? You know, the draft is this sort of multifactorial experiment, and you know, one little variable changes and the whole thing can get blown up. So, you know, you love seeing how teams react in that moment, and what, you know, that's usually when they're, you know, pretty earnest. There's not a whole lot of preparation. You can hide your emotions, and you know, some of them may even forget the cameras are on in there now. Yeah. You know, they get so dialed in on the picks.
Last one for you. I've been recruiting you for a long time, trying to get you as a scout for a bit on our platform. We haven't been able to get to things worked out here because of the things that are going, you know, you have some responsibilities in your life. The question I ask you this, and this is not putting you on the spot at all, just kind of what fascinates about the fact that, you know, you can make some money scouting for this type of league. That has to resonate with some people out there, right? Because there's a lot of there's a lot of guys out there that scout and don't make a lot of money. There's got to be some bonus to this, is there not?
Yeah, and I see it from the journalism side and from the professional scouting side too. You know, I mean, 10 years ago when Twitter started becoming a thing, and a lot of these young talented writers, you know, came along, and you know, you'd see, I call them kids because I'm middle-aged, right? You and I are in the same age bracket, basically. Yes, but I mean, you know, you'd see the young guys and gals come along and just really putting their content out there, and they're scouting people, or they're draft folks, or they're scouting for fantasy football, whatever they're doing. And you saw them grind out there. It was exciting. I mean, these are probably in a lot of cases people who weren't being paid or were being paid minimally, and that passion always sort of shined through. And I think it exists on the NFL side as well, where you talk to an out of work scout, hey, have you heard any openings? You know, I want to get in somewhere, or they're willing to take a step down, like maybe a personnel job in college football or what have you. It's because they love doing what they do. They love the investigative part of it. They love the analytic part of it. They love the, you know, give me a player and I'll give you 2,000 words on him, and I'll watch his tape, and I'll find out what was he like in high school, and I'll find out how good a teammate he was, and I'll talk to the strength coach. And you know, the scouting process, everybody thinks the draft is, oh, you're just pulling out names, but no, I mean, it's so deep, and it really is a year-long thing. So, you know, I've been witness to the media aspect of it and the football league aspect of it. And what you guys are doing is obviously kind of a combination of the two things, and to integrate scouting into it, it has to be, you know, a thrilling development and a cool thing for anybody who sits at home and says, that guy is better than that guy, despite everybody else saying the opposite. Right. And when you're right, you feel this amazing sense of validation. If you can monetize that on top of it, boom. I mean, that's outstanding.
Well said as always, my friend. I knew you'd mix your words up perfectly, and you just did. So I really appreciate that. Glad you're back home safely from a great holiday in Hawaii with the family. Always good to see you, and I wish you all the best, and hopefully talk to you soon.
Absolutely looking forward to it. Pleasure's mine, buddy.